Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Tech Done Different. As always, I'm your host, Ted Harrington, and with me here today is our special guest, Mark Geller. Mark is the COO and co-founder of Happy Returns. Mark, thanks so much for being on the show today.
Thank you, Ted. It's my pleasure.
Yeah, so the reason that I reached out to you guys and wanted to have you appear on the show was at first because I love what the business model is of what you guys are doing and really tackling a problem that I personally feel all the time, which is the pain in the butt of returning stuff when you shop online. But then as you and I got talking, I realized, wow, not only is your business model interesting, but you have so much to say that I think our audience would really benefit from in terms of how to think differently. So before I sort of jump in and start asking you 1,000 questions, maybe you could just, by way of introduction, just tell the audience kind of who you are and what you guys are up to.
Sure. Well, you mentioned I'm the co-founder of Happy Returns. Our mission is to make returns beautiful for shoppers, retailers, and the planet. We provide end-to-end return solutions for online and omni-channel retailers. So basically, as you mentioned, to make the process of returning products that you bought online much more easy, fast, and delightful than a traditional return by mail would be. We've been in business about 5.5 years. We did actually pioneer the process of being able to do a box-free return at a third-party retailer. So we launched about 5 years ago. Amazon, about 18 months after that, launched a program that's somewhat similar, where you can buy something on Amazon, and if you want to do a return, you could take it to a Kohl's store. So they are now in all Kohl's locations and Whole Foods and UPS, et cetera. So if anyone has done that kind of return, that's the process that we actually pioneered, and we provide that service for essentially all retailers not named Amazon. So that's what we've been doing at Happy Returns, and more broadly, my career has been mostly in software product management and marketing. So for 25 plus years, I've been working mostly with small teams of talented people to build new kinds of software, whether it's for business to business, business to consumer, at a variety of startups and some bigger companies. Probably most notably Google. Here, I worked on the photos team in Los Angeles for a few years, so had a lot of experience working in a lot of different environments from small to very large, and mainly around creating software and doing marketing as well.
Cool. One of the things that you've said to me in earlier conversations, so good I actually wrote it down, is this idea of, the willingness to do things differently, which is, of course, certainly the sort of main thrust of what this entire show is about. But so let's talk about that idea in terms of, in practical terms. So what you guys have done is interesting to me in that the way that your partner, your business partner, David, was describing it to me was how you're sort of this, a combination of a software company and a logistics company. You've sort of taken the digital and the physical, and you've combined them to solve a problem that, exists today. So help our audience sort of walk through, from your viewpoint, what's the mental process you go through in order to identify something like that? Because a lot of people think about software as software and physical things are physical things, and you sort of span the two. How do you go about evaluating the combination of those types of things?
You mean in terms of how do we decide to do something like combine software and logistics?
Yeah, that's pretty
Yeah, it was
bold.
in this case, it was actually a pretty organic process. It started with the idea to do box-free drop-off returns. And the backstory there is that David, my co-founder, and I were working at a company called Hotlook, which was a flash sale company based here in Los Angeles. That company was acquired by Nordstrom in 2011. And one of the things that we wanted to do after we were acquired was to create this program we called Return to Rack, which was to make it easy for shoppers, Hotlook shoppers, online shoppers, if they wanted to do a return, instead of having the only option be to put it in a box and ship it back through the mail, be able to just walk it in and essentially do an in-store return at a Nordstrom Rack physical location. We didn't think that a lot of people were going to use that option because we knew that there wasn't a lot of overlap between our shoppers. Most of them had never been to a Nordstrom Rack store. It was mainly more of a marketing exercise to make sure people understood we really are part of the Nordstrom family. And we launched that service, and very quickly realized that it was incredibly popular. We thought maybe 15 or 20% of our returns would come back that way. And within a few months, we had 70% plus of our returns coming back.
Wow.
And so that was just simply, you didn't have to be a rocket scientist to realize, wow, people really prefer returning this way. And kind of that light bulb moment of, we thought online shoppers wanted to do everything kind of from their homes and online and didn't really want to set foot in a store. And it turns out that when you give them the choice, they overwhelmingly preferred to return in person. And so uh, I guess if there was an innovation there, it was realizing that this kind of process would not only benefit someone like Hotlook, who in this case owned the online site and the store, but the idea there was, well, why couldn't we make a company and offer this as a third party service for all the other retailers who either don't have stores or have relatively small store footprints? And so that's what got us started with the box free, the software piece, the drop off piece. And once we got in that business, we were able to get started and validate that customers really did love returning that way. And as we were working with retailers, we realized two things really. Well, I guess first we realized that we had to do the logistics. And the reason was that at the return bars, we are accepting returns from various different retailers, and we're putting them in a single now reusable tote and shipping them from the return bar to somewhere to process them. Well, it turns out that no one else had ever done that before. So none of the third party logistics providers were set up to do something like open a box, sort the items out by retailer, and then possibly process them, but then reaggregate them and ship them to different places. That was just a thing that didn't really exist. And we talked to some of the existing partners and realized they were really going to struggle with doing this anywhere nearly as fast as we want to do it. And so it just became clear to us, hey, it looks like we're going to have to do logistics here. And that wasn't our intention when we started the business. We thought, cool, we're going to be a software company, and we're going to enable this software that enables this in-person process, and then we're going to work with partners in the ecosystem. But we quickly realized that we were going to have to do the logistics to provide the level of service we wanted. And then it sort of dawned on us, that's, I think, a lot of what Amazon is doing as well, right? The reason that they have become so incredibly capable in logistics is because when you can provide that end-to-end service all the way from, the first discovery and shopping and purchase through the logistics and including the reverse logistics, the returns, you can provide a vastly better experience for the customer and ultimately at a much lower price. And so once we realized that, it sort of clicked for us. This is the right answer. We know this is the best answer because it is the best. It's the best answer for everyone involved. It's the best process for the shopper. It's the best solution for the retailer. It's better for the planet, et cetera. So there we were with the drop off and the logistics piece. And in working with the retailers, we then realized what they wanted was that whole solution. And so we then went upstream and built the online return flow as well. So it's all enabled by software. But it really, the centerpiece really was the box-free drop-off. And then we connected that with the logistics and the software. And so that's how we ended up with that combination, was just watching the market. First, watching customers vote with their feet and walking into locations, and then working with retailers and hearing them say to us literally, this is great, but what I really want you to do is solve my whole returns problem. And that means an end-to-end integrated, comprehensive solution, which is the combination of software and logistics. So it was really, it wasn't some kind of genius insight. It was just, paying attention and listening and watching what customers were doing and listening to what retailers were asking. And then from that standpoint, then trying to envision, so what would that solution look like, and getting to some kind of answer that was compelling for people.
Yeah, what's so interesting about hearing you describe that is a theme that is consistent with pretty much any company that succeeds, right? Which is that you're starting from the position of what's the problem, like who's my customer, what's the customer's problem, and then work backwards from it to solve it. And that's a different viewpoint than the way that I think a lot of people often think about entrepreneurship, which is, well, I've got this idea and I'm going to now go like create this idea and then people will come to it. And those are, you can succeed that way too. If you invent something that, like, was it Henry Ford, he said, well, if I just gave people what they asked for, we just have a faster horse. And he created something people didn't know to ask for. So that's a pretty cool process that I just heard you describe. Given that you're creating software to solve a problem in a way that these logistics, the logistics element hadn't really ever been done before, what kind of issues did you run into with something like that, and how do you address those types of issues?
Well, I mean, the most basic level, what we faced was the fact that no one had done this before, so we had to essentially create it all from scratch. So, in terms of, for example, having the warehouse, it's one thing to take out a lease on a building and hire people, but we needed software to actually execute this process. And using off-the-shelf software to accomplish the process we needed was really, I guess we could have tried to do that, but it really wouldn't have worked well. Um, and so the most fundamental challenge was we had to design and build software from scratch. And at a high level, there are kind of two ways to approach doing that. One is to try to hire people with a lot of experience writing warehouse software, and the other is to just try to hire really talented, smart people who are going to be thoughtful about this problem and try to solve it. And We definitely lean toward the latter. So we now have a phenomenally capable logistics management team. But for the first 2 or 3 years in the company, we didn't. It was just us figuring out and trying to figure it out as we went what we needed. And we worked through several different versions of our software, and we've created something at this point that's actually very cool and helps us accomplish what we need to do, which is stand up processes for retailers very quickly without any new coding by engineers in a matter of hours, and have a system that's so easy to use that we can hire new hub specialists and have them up and running at very high levels of productivity in a matter of days and even hours. And so it was a matter of working hard and being very thoughtful and iterating that software. And just again, in this case, the customers were the hub specialists and the managers of the hubs, and really trying to understand what is it that they need to accomplish the kinds of goals that we have, and designing custom software for them. And that is something that evolved over the course of 5 years, really, of a lot of iteration and hard work. And so that was kind of foundationally what we did, was hire a bunch of smart, talented people and give them an interesting challenge to solve. And then I think the other thing that we did, maybe that was helpful there, was a little maybe less obvious, was having that be connected to this larger mission that those kinds of folks can get excited about. So it isn't to say that you can't hire very talented people to just solve a warehouse software, but if you can have a even more compelling, broader message of solving returns for all of e-commerce, which is a $500 billion a year problem, which, as you mentioned, we all have, we all know what that is, and give them the ability to not only work on the hub piece, but also on the consumer-facing piece, and just make it that much more compelling, so that you really can create the kind of job that a super talented person wants to have.
Mhm.
And so that's, I think, been another kind of key to what we've done, is to create the kind of jobs that some really talented folks want to have, and give them the ability to work across our stack. And so we end up getting access to a level of talent that otherwise, as a small startup working in logistics, it's sometimes hard to get access to.
Mm. This theme that you've brought up here, the sort of the fork in the road, is one that I see rampant across technology, and especially I see it in my corner of the woods, which is in security, which is, should you hire the people who have the specific exact experience you're looking for, which in your case, the warehouse logistics, or hire smart people capable and have the aptitude of acquiring that skill and then giving them, training them on the specifics or giving them the opportunity to learn it. And I am a staunch believer in the fork that you guys took, which is, hire smart people, and then you can teach them certain elements. I mean, some disciplines, like you need specific expertise, and in security, that is definitely one of the challenges. But when you find yourself now trying to go recruit these super talented people, and you're competing with big brand names that everybody in the world knows, who also want those same people and are willing to spend more than a small company can spend in compensation. How do you deal with that?
Well, I think the basic approach from my standpoint is if you want to attract and retain super talented people, you have to create the kinds of jobs those people want to have. And part of it is comp, but it really is only comp is really only part of it. There are a number of other factors and reasons why someone would potentially be attracted to a job like this. Um, uh, First of all, it's just the opportunity to be part of a small team, to be able to create something brand new from scratch that's never been done before, to work with other outstanding people, and to really have the opportunity, to enjoy their work and also to continue to really grow. And there are a variety of things that can help them grow. Working in, kind of a new interesting problem with new people, with management that is very attuned to helping them grow and giving them opportunities and feedback and all of those kinds of things. Um, where someone would say, it's really apples and oranges. If you're comparing working in a place like Happy Returns to something like Google, Google is phenomenal. Obviously, there are incredible opportunities there, but it's a different kind of opportunity. It's a gigantic company. You're not going to get to work on the breadth of uh, functionality that you are at a place at a small startup like Happy Returns, and it's just different. And so it's apples and oranges, and you need to find the people that are at the stage of their career where they're more attracted to apples than oranges.
Yeah, that's great advice for sure. So, and that's worked out for you guys. Obviously, over the years, you've been able to find and retain those people. And the discussion about comp is an interesting one. And I agree with you because we have the same struggle, right? Like talented security professionals are in demand everywhere, and Apple and Google and Amazon, all those people are certainly trying to hire them too. And how do you compete? And I agree. We've been doing a lot of the same things that you mentioned. And I like the way you're framing this, the idea of create jobs that people want. And the things you listed off are like, yeah, those actually sound like great jobs that people would want. How did you get to that? How did you get to the point of saying, well, we know that the kind of person who's going to thrive in our company, make our company succeed, is going to want this type of job? How did you uncover that?
I think it's just spending a lot of time around different kinds of talented folks, and just and understanding what excites them, what do they care about, what is compelling for them in a job, right? And I don't think that's in any way unique to Happy Returns. I don't even think it's unique to high growth startups.
Hmm.
I think it's just always the case. People, it's I think it's easy to get sort of a blind spot and look at it from the manager side or the executive side or the founder side of like, what do I need? Right. Well, I need a really talented person and I would like them to operate in XYZ. And I think to understand that, most folks in this kind of work are very much free agents, and the most talented ones absolutely get to pick where they work. Right.
Mhm.
So it's not, I mean, you need to be aware of what your needs are as a company, of course, but that's not super relevant for, like, they don't care what your needs are per se, right? They're viewing the world as we all do, of they're trying to make the best decisions for them and their family if they have one, right? And so it's what do I want? What is going to excite me? Why will I have a great experience if I work at this company versus that company? And to really set aside your sort of managerial perspective and view it entirely through their perspective and think, if I am actually this person, what do I want? I want work that is interesting. I want coworkers that are awesome and that inspire me and that I learn from and that I just enjoy working with. All of those kinds of things. So I think the key is really just to try to view it from their perspective and say, I'm this person and I can go anywhere and do anything at any time. So what do I want to do? What's fun for me? What are the aspects of the job? And you don't have to please all the people. You have to please some of the people a lot of the time,
Right.
in that perspective. And I think that's really the key, is to really try to truly view it through their perspective and realizing that they absolutely could leave. And so what would make them, essentially, how can you keep someone so happy that they are genuinely just not interested to take calls from recruiters?
Mhm.
Or they're just like, Yeah, don't need to.
Good, right.
And the other simple way is to just ask them, what are you looking for? And that's a question I ask in every interview. You know, what are the characteristics of what's an ideal next position for you? What is most important to you?
Yeah, that's great. So if we think about the culture that you're describing is one that is based on, incredibly capable, intelligent, competent people. Um, it's possible that when you put that many high powered people in one space, that it almost creates friction where you have like, too many quarterbacks and, maybe not enough, I don't know, pick a different role
Yeah,
player.
sure.
Um, how in your experience, how have you managed that to create a harmonious culture where all of these high powered people are actually working together and aren't like having any sort of power struggles?
Yeah, it's a good question. I would say there's a distinction between someone who is talented and highly productive and great at their job versus being a kind of type A personality. Um, and so I think it probably would be challenging if you had a whole team of kind of type A folks who really feel like they need to be the leader of the team.
Hmm.
Um, and I think you kind of get a feel for that. But I think what you do want is, and what you will in most cases probably end up with is a mix of people. And I think as you're hiring, it is important to give that thought. So I think that's one thing is you're not trying to draft quarterbacks, right? You don't want a whole team of quarterbacks, and
Right.
you don't need one. The analogy I actually do use, at least internally with myself, is a basketball team because it's 5 starters plus some bench players. That's about the size of an individual engineering team. And the best basketball teams typically have a couple superstars and then other role players that are very good at certain kinds of things. And in my experience, that is often kind of how it goes on an engineering team as well. Um, but so that's one thing is you kind of want a mix of either however you want to think it, like sort of leaders and contributors, or type A and not, or however you want to think about that. And then the other piece that's really big, I guess, two other pieces is the overall culture, the culture of the company, the culture of the team, which is simply we're all going to be highly collaborative. And again, to really screen for that in the interviews, and to try to get at, do you genuinely enjoy collaborating with people? Because if you don't, there's an awesome company for you to work at somewhere else that's just not going to be a fit for how we want to work. That's just a must have. Um, and then so the culture I think is really important. And so even if you did have quarterbacks, it's like, hey, if you're a quarterback and that's awesome, but like here's the culture of this team, like we all work together. And then the other piece is process, right? So the culture I think is much more important than the process. That whole kind of culture eats process for breakfast type of thing, which I generally agree with, especially in small teams. But especially as the team scales, the process is important because it just helps set up a situation where it's easier for people to collaborate well and work well together. And you have fewer kind of collisions and friction, and it just helps things. It helps people kind of fulfill their best intentions. If you have a great culture but chaos, it's still going to be problematic, and it's not really going to bring out the best people. So it's really a mix of people plus a great culture plus enough process to kind of keep people from bumping into each other.
Yeah, that's really interesting insight. And one of the things that my business partner and I have, uh, I guess, not debated, but we've talked about a lot over the years is at one point, one of us said, I can't remember which one of us said this, but one of us said like, well, of course you can't build a team of only the A plus like superstars. And then we're like, but can you? What actually inherently would stop us from doing that? And so I think we've been lucky that we really have been largely, A players across the company. But you bring up I like this, I love this metaphor of the basketball team, because you think about like the Bulls. I just watched that Michael Jordan documentary, and Steve Kerr, he's got what, like 8 rings or something, but he's a role player. But he's like one of the most accomplished athletes of all time.
Right.
And that's
Well,
pretty
I mean,
easy.
in that analogy, I don't know how up on basketball folks are, but Dennis Rodman, he didn't have all the tools, but he was one of the best rebounders in history, and that was fulfilled an awesome need on that team. And so that's a perfect example of everyone on the team can be an A player, right? Steve Kerr is an A plus 3-point shooter, right?
Yeah.
But he's not a rebounder. So it takes a blend. The team really does need a mix of talents. And so you absolutely want everyone, if you can, you absolutely want everyone to be an A or an A plus player at whatever their set of talents is. And then it's the job of the manager, whomever is kind of constructing this team, to try to make sure that you have the right mix of talents and the right mix of personalities to be able to work well together. If you have a team where all 5 people, all they really want is to be promoted to the next level, and there's only one of those positions, that might work well for a short period of time if that meets your need, but that is not a equilibrium that's going to sustain for any period of time. So you have to be aware of what you're trying to accomplish, and in general, for the kind of longer, sustainable, more it's a marathon, not a sprint situation, having a blend of skills and personalities, but having everyone be a player at what they're doing. And so everyone appreciates that. They love, hey, I'm not, my front end skills maybe aren't as strong as someone else's, and that person is just awesome and they create great front end really fast and really well. And that's people love working that way. And so that can work really well and be sustainable over time.
One of the things I'm observing, hearing you talk about these various leadership principles and culture building principles, is it seems to me like you're very aware of the dynamics happening across the entire company, but within different teams, and how to like set those things up correctly. So maybe let me ask you about the harder or less enjoyable side of culture and team building, which is talking about when separation is required. And some companies maybe their philosophy is fire fast, and other companies is, hey, maybe let's fire a little slower and see if we can like course correct behaviors or whatever. How have you looked at this problem this challenge of when it looks like there might not be the exact right fit, either for an individual or the whole team just isn't jiving? How do you think about making changes?
We fortunately have not had to do that a lot, but have a few times. And what we've done is, I guess our philosophy is essentially to try to adjust the approach based on the situation. And I think a couple of key principles, I think the most important thing that I think many people are aware of is, if you have someone who really isn't capable of performing in a job, you're not doing anyone any favors, including them, and maybe especially them, by having them continue in the job. It is not fun to go to a job where because most people really know, like, I'm not really performing well in this job. If they're not, that doesn't feel great. No one loves getting out of bed and doing whatever it is they do in a situation that's just not a good fit for them. And so, they can be very difficult, very challenging conversations. They can be very painful for folks. But ultimately, I am, sort of guided by the idea that if you can, so I think it's two things. One is to try to really get a handle on, can this person actually get to the level where they are doing excellent work? And that's our standard. It's not, perfection. It's not, unbelievable. We're looking for excellence, right? So can this person get to the point in a relatively short period of time, probably 3 to 6 months, no more, where they are truly excellent, and you would want to fight to keep them for the job. And you make your best determination if that's the case. Sometimes for sure no, sometimes you're very confident yes, and sometimes you're not sure. And if you're not sure, then you need to sort of try to gather more data about that. But I think that's the key thing, is if you're really clear, okay, wow, this is really not a fit. I think it is best for everyone. It's best for that person. It's definitely best for their teammates, and it's best for the company to terminate them from the position, but to do that in the most humane possible way. And I think that means just being genuinely empathetic, and to realize like that is an awful experience in a lot of different ways, and to try to give them accurate feedback, even if it is in a very sort of kind, humane way, but accurate, This is what we were looking for. This is what we see you doing. Our assessment is that we don't believe you're going to be able to get to this point. And so we think it's going to be best for you to leave the team. And there are various ways to do that. Sometimes it's just an immediate dismissal with hopefully a generous severance package. Sometimes it's a little more graceful. We'll give you a couple months, just go find a new position. But it's essentially you're going to need to be somewhere else. And so that's sort of the fire fast. That's the situation where you're like, it's very clear this is not going to work. It only gets worse if you don't terminate them, including the termination. Just everything's worse. So it's kind of like in a very in I guess the most humane way possible to kind of rip the Band-Aid off. It truly is best, and especially if you can really give them accurate feedback, which they may not want to hear, and they may not actually be able to hear it. They might not really be able to take it on board at that time. But my belief is, first of all, some people really can take it on board. People vary dramatically in their ability to hear that kind of feedback. And I also believe that even for the people who can't hear it at that time, like it is useful to get the data from the market, right? This company is saying this about how you performed in this job. And they're free to do with that information what they want, but you're doing them a disservice if you do not give them that data, right? Because it's hard to get that data. There are only a few data points you get like that, and to just let someone go or either make up a reason that wasn't the reason and sort of sugarcoat and saying, well, we've gone a different direction, we don't need this position, when in reality we do need the position and you're not performing. I mean, there are legal aspects of that, but it's not fair, it's not good, it's not humane for that person. And so in the fire fast case, I think that's kind of the approach. In the case where you're not sure, or especially if you're confident they can get there, it's really about having a plan. I mean, it's the lingo is performance improvement plan. That has a very bad connotation because most commonly that's just we're going to fire you in a couple months. And we really, really try not to do that. For us, it's here's a plan, and we're giving you a plan because we think you can, and hopefully we'll get there. And we've had a couple folks who did get there, and that is awesomely gratifying to know that you gave them that chance, and to see some people can really do amazing things. And give them that plan, be very clear about it. And again, the goal is, if you're giving them that plan, the goal is you're going to succeed. You're going to stay here. One of the things I always hated when I saw in my career was people that were given a performance improvement plan as this pro forma legal thing and just absolutely set up to fail. There was no chance they were going to succeed. The company didn't want them to succeed. It was just checking a box for a lawyer. Yeah. And that is just something we would never want to do. It's a terrible experience for the person. Like, it's one thing to be fired, but it's another thing to be set up for 2 or 3 months in a situation where you can't succeed. And so we would not want to do that. So I guess the guiding principles are really try to figure out, do you think this person can make it? If you think they can, give them a plan where you really think they will succeed. And throughout, in any situation, try to be as humane as you possibly can.
Yeah, it's funny how PIPs are, it's almost like you're pre-fired. Like, exactly. You're not fired yet, yeah. But
right? Which is like, the only thing worse than being fired would be being pre-fired, right? You're fired and you have to sit here for a couple months and just, bad.
Yeah. So that definitely makes sense to me. And especially when we're talking about where there's performance issues, like the performance isn't up to a particular standard. What about scenarios? And if you haven't come across this, then that's fine. We can change direction. But what about a scenario where a performer, because we have come across this in the past, where the performance is great. They're actually, in terms of like the key metrics they're supposed to do in the job, they're actually hitting them. But it's all the other things, the intangibles, the sort of way they fit into culture, stuff like that, that is not very great. And that is a really hard business decision. How have you dealt with situations like that in the past?
We have had a couple situations like that. And I think that kind of thing does tend to happen as a company is scaling. Some people, they're a great fit for a company when it's very small, but as the company starts to scale and, for example, they need more process and more structure, that's not something they're excited about. And it is very difficult. And I think the thing is to just try to be as to try to assess the situation as objectively and accurately as you can. And it's tough because not only, as you said, is this person uh, performing well, or at least they have demonstrated that they're a high performer in the past, but often, like, they've been there for a while and you know them and you like them. And it's just painful to see, like, because of course the company has to grow and wants to grow. And to see people where, as the company is evolving, it's just no longer a fit. It's just painful. Because it's leading to a parting of the ways. And I think what we try to do in that situation is really just to try to very simply say, um, is this still the best thing for the company? And you just think about the two scenarios very simply of, what does this look like for the next, now and through the next 12 or 24 months if they stay, and what does it look like if they don't? And in particular, what does it look like 3 months after they aren't here? And that could just be like, that's not necessarily a termination. It could be, hey, we just really see we're kind of going in different directions here. Maybe you want to start thinking about finding a situation that's a better fit for you. And to not focus on the pain of that separation and like, oh man, what are we losing with this person who has so much institutional knowledge and et cetera, et cetera. Um, because if you just focus on the pain of that, you'll never make a change, even if it would have been much better. And what I try to do is sort of squint and look out 3 to 6 months later and say, okay, this person is gone. They've been replaced with someone else. What does the team look like with them? What does the team look like without them? And just be honest, like, if all other things were equal, which one would I pick? And if the answer is like, you know what, I think we're going to be in a better position, 12 months from now, if this person isn't here and we're just scaling and all those people who are here are really on board with that scaling. Um, and that's where I think it makes it easier to realize, this is the kind of thing that we need to do. Um, you recognize that it's going to be painful to separate, but you can't focus on only that because it will impair your ability to make a decision that's good, again, for the company and ultimately for that person, because they are not going to get happier as the level of process increases.
Right. Well, it certainly strikes me, Mark, that you are building a really vibrant culture there, and I'm admiring it from afar. So, as we wrap up here, let me ask you one last question here, and let's talk about what you think is coming around the corner. If you think about the next 12 or 24 months in the, pick which lane you want to talk about, whether it's logistics or the whole returns problem, or what in your worldview, how's the world gonna be different in a year or two from now?
Um, Man, easy question. Um, just kidding. I think what's happening in the world of returns and reverse logistics is, it's not necessarily the kind of things where people who don't work in the industry would think like, oh, returns, like, wow, that's a really sexy industry. But the fact is that returns is actually it's an incredibly dynamic time for returns right now. There are 4 or 5 companies that are really kind of focusing on improving the overall returns experience. And I think what you're going to see over the next year is a tremendous amount of change and innovation, and probably some big announcements of various kinds of companies partnering with larger companies, and just actually a very large increase in the awareness in the broader e-commerce world and even in the consumer world of, finally, returns are seeing dramatic innovation that we've seen throughout the rest of the world of e-commerce, and everything kind of leading to the whole shopping experience and checkout and all of that, and everything except this one other piece of the journey that's super important, especially for online purchases, which is returns. And people, I think we're seeing it sort of in the past year, and I think it's going to just accelerate more in 2021 of people realizing, my only option for online returns is really not going to be putting that thing in its own box or bag and shipping it by itself across the country. There are going to be very obvious, very accessible ways to do returns that are dramatically better, and that people's expectations are rapidly changing to, no way am I going to put this in a box and, God forbid, print out a shipping label and
Oh my God.
pack it all together and wait 10 days and pay $7 to do a return. Um, this is going to get a whole lot easier, and not only for Amazon, but for everyone. And people are just going to expect returns to be as easy as the rest of online shopping has become.
I love it. Mark Geller, co-founder at Happy Returns. Thank you so much for spending some time with us here today. And for everybody else, if you want to learn more about the podcast or request to appear as a guest yourself, just head over to tedharrington.com/podcast, and we will catch you next time.